be joining us remotely, and to every member in the public gallery and those who are joining us via webcast. Before we begin, I'll call on Councillor Beregi to give the acknowledgement of country.
Thank you, Mayor. On behalf of all present and those watching on webcast, I acknowledge the traditional owners of these lands in which we meet and pay our respects to ancestors and spirits past and present.
Thank you. Councillors, we've received a request from Councillor Hoy for a leave of absence and also from Councillor Spenceley for remote attendance due to work. Is there a motion? Thank you, Councillor Santa, seconded by Councillor Beregi. The motion is that we grant a leave of absence to Councillor Hoy and remote attendance to Councillor Spenceley. All those in favour? And that is carried. Are there any disclosures of interest? Councillor Welsh.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. 10.3 and non-pecuniary, non-significant because I'm the chair of the Sydney Coastal Council Group.
Are there any others? This meeting is being recorded and made publicly available on Council's website. Those present should refrain from making any defamatory statements. By attending the meeting, you are giving consent to your image and voice being webcast. A reminder from the Code of Meeting Practice, councillors, council staff and members of the public must ensure that mobile phones are turned to silent during meetings of council, and councillors who need to use their phone to text, talk or engage in social media activity must leave the chamber to do so. That brings us to confirmation of the minutes from the meeting held on the 8th of September. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Santa, seconded by Councillor Carr. Any discussion? I put the minutes. All those in favour? And that is carried. Councillors, we've had requests from a number of speakers on two items. The first is 10.9, the planning proposal of 2024. There are 5 people who have registered to speak: Chris Bosley, Simon Jenkins, Meredith Trevelyan-Jones, Sophie Kuznurzik, and Rob Mackay. And on 11.2, the notice of motion on safety improvements at Barry Lane and Yeo Street, one person has registered to speak, Timothy Moon. Is there a procedural motion to open the public forum and bring those items forward? Councillor Beregi.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that we bring items 10.9, planning proposal, 4/24, 166 to 188 and 198 to 214 Military Road, Neutral Bay, and 11.2, notice of motion 2025, safety improvements at Barry Lane and Yeo Street intersection, Neutral Bay, forward so that we can and open the public forum so we can hear from the speakers before the debate.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Antonini. All those in favour? And those against, and that is carried. So that now brings us to the mayoral minutes. The first is pretty self-explanatory and probably the shortest that I've ever written. It's to advocate for a coffee pop-up at the Coal Loader Waverton. Many of you would have known that on the 10th of September, the day that this agenda was published, the cafe known as Sylvie at the Coal Loader Cafe closed. The cafe was very much appreciated by locals and visitors. I've certainly heard from many people in Waverton and further afield that the loss of the cafe leaves something to be desired at the Coal Loader. Certainly it's really important, I think, that we continue to have activation, particularly on the weekends and particularly as this in spring, in that anyone who's been there for the last few weekends would have seen hundreds, if not thousands of people wending their way through the Coal Loader platform and the Centre for Sustainability. So I therefore recommend that Council facilitate a coffee pop-up at the Coal Loader, particularly on the weekends, whilst the process to secure a new tenant for the cafe is underway. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is the idea, I'm supportive, is the idea to go out to tender for the pop-up, or is it just appointed locally? What's the process?
Please sit down. The point of a pop-up is that it would be well under the amount of money that you would have to go to tender, which is $250,000 of expenditure. It's not intended that council would expend anything. We were at the HMAS Platypus for a community awards and citizenship ceremony on Friday, and there was a 1950s caravan serving amazing coffees. It would be about the coal loader staff who are quite used to facilitating just those types of pop-ups at the platform to find an appropriate person who might think they can make a go of it for the short time that we'd be offering it. There any other discussion? Put the item, all those in favour? And that is carried. And that brings me with somewhat heavy heart to the second mayoral minute. As you all know, since January of this year, when the Housing Delivery Authority was established by the state government and commenced considering expressions of interest for proposals to be declared state significant development or for fast-tracked concurrent rezonings, more than 10 proposals in our local government area have been so declared by the Minister, and with many more in the pipeline. Those state significant development proposals, if approved by the Minister as delegate, will account for more than 3,000 new dwellings on a handful of sites. That is half of the 5-year housing target allocated to our council area. And that doesn't take into account factoring in the contribution of the low to mid-rise so-called reforms or the St Leonard's Crow's Nest 2036 plan as hugely augmented by the gazetted Crow's Nest accelerated transport-oriented development controls. The SSD pathway is a fast-track process. It overrides local planning. Historically, most of the state significant development applications that this council has seen have been for development in Crow's Nest, St Leonard's and the North Sydney CBD. But since the Housing Delivery Authority was established, projects have been proposed in areas that until now have seen little large-scale development, such as at Lavender and Middle Mist Streets, at Lavender Bay or Blue Street, North Sydney, and on the Francis Xavier church site at Lavender Bay. Certainly, I've been approached by many residents who are shocked by the scale of the projects, by the fast track, the process through the Housing Delivery Authority and state significant development, and the fact that it overrides the council's own planning controls. It has left many residents in McMahon's Point, Milson's Point and Lavender Bay feeling overwhelmed and I think somewhat powerless against the state planning juggernaut. There are 3 particular state significant developments at 5 and 15 Blue Street, North Sydney, and at 1 to 13, 17 to 19 Mackenzie Street and 211 Blues Point Road, that's the Francis Xavier site, that ought to be considered not as individual applications but holistically as part of a precinct adjoining North Sydney Station. So the first of those at 15 Blue Street is the Fujitsu building. And it's proposing a rezoning from the E2 commercial core centre zone to MU1 mixed use. And it's proposing a height increase from RL 130 to RL 162 and construction of a 30-storey tower with 200 apartments and a new entry to North Sydney Station, as well as other public domain works. At 5 Blue Street, the Zurich building, it again proposes a rezoning from the E2 commercial centre to MU1 mixed use and a construction of a 29-storey tower with 195 affordable housing co-living units on levels 1 to 5 and a residential flat building on levels 6 to 27 with approximately 200 apartments. So we're looking at 400 odd there. And on the Francis Xavier church site, again, another planned rezoning to MU1 mixed use from SP2 infrastructure for the church use and an increase of height to permit a 20-storey tower, adaptive reuse of the former school building and construction of 186 dwellings within that 20-storey tower, a 3-storey residential building and a 7-storey mixed-use building with 5 levels of residential units. Now, everyone knows that those sites adjoin the Lavender Bay Heritage Conservation Area, which includes St Peter's Presbyterian Church and grounds, St Peter's Presbyterian Church Manse, St Francis Xavier Church itself, and the school hall. But really importantly, more than 30 individual heritage items ranging from some of those terraces on Lower Walker Street, which are amongst the first built on this side of the harbour, to the workers' cottages in Willona Avenue. The topography is steep and drops sharply from North Sydney Station to Lavender Street. The Heritage Conservation Area and the adjoining properties are to the south of these proposed state significant developments and give rise to significant amenity impacts as a result of the proposed tower. So on the 16th of July and on the 17th of July, and then subsequently on the 22nd of August, depending on which of the applications we're talking about, the Department of Planning issued Secretary's environmental assessment requirements for each of these. And there were three, each of them had a requirement in relation to public space to demonstrate collaboration and a consistent approach for the public domain and proposed Blue Street Square with the landowners of the adjoining land on Blue Street, so that's 5 and 15, and the Catholic Church at 17 Mackenzie Street. Two of them have a requirement that the traffic impact assessment report should assess the cumulative impacts arising from surrounding known or committed developments, including but not limited to adjoining sites at 15 and 5 Blue Street and 1 to 13 Mackenzie Street. Those tiers implicitly acknowledge what we know about best practice planning, which is that you should consider all three applications on adjoining land with proposed interconnected public domain works as a part of a holistic precinct plan, not site by site in isolation. All three applications propose a fast-tracked rezoning. Two of those sites are on the fringes of the North Sydney CBD and are zoned E2 Commercial Centre. That E2 commercial centre use is something the council has been fiercely defending for decades. And the reason it's being so fiercely defended is acknowledged by the current Sydney Region Plan, as well as the District North Plan, because they're part of the Eastern Economic Corridor. That CBD and the commercial uses there contribute approximately $23 billion to the state GDP and to the nation. And both of those plans that I reference, the Sydney Region Plan, discourage, say that it's critical, a long-term office space supply is critical to maintaining Greater Sydney's global economic role and should not be compromised by residential development. In relation to the North Sydney CBD and its fringes, the North District Plan says about the North Sydney CBD, its ongoing protection and growth is key to its prominent role in the Greater Sydney office market. So this important strategic context must be considered not only for each site, but also the cumulative impact of rezoning all three sites on this special precinct around North Sydney Station. In my view, it's vital that the three applications be assessed and considered together to promote excellent, careful planning within this important precinct, to properly consider the strategic merit of the proposed rezonings in the context of the vital role that the E2 Commercial Centre area plays within the state and national economy and in terms of providing employment and economic growth, to address the height, form and massing of the proposed 20, 29 and 30-storey towers on adjoining properties next to a heritage conservation area to the south in order to mitigate amenity impacts such as solar access, visual and acoustic privacy, and to ensure coordinated public domain improvements and public benefits arising from any upzoning, which will deliver considerable increased yield on each of those sites, consistent with the very careful local planning that this council has been undertaking for more than a decade. One of which included a consideration of that North Sydney CBD and a change on the Zurich site to permit some additional height and to allow for and to remove the Blue Street Plaza as a special area under the LEP, and that was all to promote that economic and employment function of that zoning. So I therefore recommend that council write to the Minister for Planning and the Planning Secretary, urging that the 3 sites be considered concurrently and as part of an holistic precinct plan, and seek a meeting with the Minister and the Department to discuss the impacts of these projects, best practice planning, and the future of the North Sydney CBD and the E2 commercial centre zone. Is there any discussion? Councillor Santa.
Thank you, Mayor. These SSDs are a classic example of the contradiction between the established need to protect existing established heritage areas and the need to clearly recognise the joint need to provide residential housing, while at the same time ensuring that there are established venues for industry and commerce. The SSDs undermine the established recognition of the need to respect the current mix of heritage, residential and office commercial sites. For council to make a stand on these state government proposals, I support this, even if they are quixotic, because they demonstrate that we listen to our community and adopt policies in line with our community's interests and concerns. Therefore, I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Any other speakers? I'll put the item. All those in favour? And those against? And that is carried. So that brings us to item 10.9, planning proposal 1 of 2024, 166 to 168 and 198 to 214 Military Road, Neutral Bay. The first registered speaker is Chris Bosley, and I'll call him forward.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Chris Bosley. I have been asked to speak on behalf of Neutral Precinct about this matter. I bring with me the motion that was passed at our last meeting, that we request that Council accept the North Sydney Local Planning Panel report recommendations that PP4/24 not to proceed to Gateway, and that Council requires Arcadia to revise the proposal to take account of the NSLPPs and residents' concerns. That got a unanimous vote, by the way, at the meeting. I'd like to say this. It's probably, 14, 15 months since we started this journey with the state government. And I seem to recall, in fact, it only occurred to me today, proximity to town centre, within 400 metres of town centre, all zones except R2, residential flat buildings of up to 21 metres, 6 to 7 stories. So how do we get to 12 stories? Where does that come from? I see we've got 12 stories now for Andrew's house, which is on the corner of Military Road and Rangers Road. That's gone through.
Not yet. Had Gateway.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, it looks like it will go through. I have read somewhere that Woolworths is now re-looking at Rangers Road as well, 12 stories.
That's significant development.
And now this one, 12 stories. So I just thought, I'm starting to call this an arms race. He got 12 stories. Can I have 12? Can we have 12? Before we know it, there'll be 12 stories all the way along the corridor. So the next thing, Arcadia. Now, they're proposing, from what I understand, to move the existing community centre westward, I guess is the word, into one of their buildings, which we're going to get a rent-free period, and then we're going to have to lease the space off them. I also understand that the community centre will be inside the building, which means you've got to go through security to get into the centre, and I assume it's going to have elevator access versus what we currently have, which is a community centre right in the middle of the car park with ramp access, and you don't have to go through external security. So it's not really a win for the community if we're going to move it to that other place, apart from the financials and everything else. I mean, at least council's got 3 tenants in the building at the moment, so we're earning some income. But last, but not least, so the last issue is access, and this is where at least council has some leverage. They've asked for access across the council's car park, and we know that that's all up in the air. It's our opinion, and I'll read exactly what we've said here from the precinct. The proposed use of public land for vehicular access to private parking is also unacceptable. Any questions? No?
Are there any questions of the speaker?
Okay,
Thank you very much. The next registered speaker is Simon Jenkins. If you would please come forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Simon Jenkins. I'm not representing anyone in particular in relation to things, but it's, I guess I spend a fair bit of time in and around the Neutral Bay area there. And I guess my biggest thing with it is the council or our community controls the car park. It controls the, excuse me, it also controls the community centre. Both of those things seem to be necessary for the developments that are happening in and around that environment. I don't understand why the council doesn't just say to these developers, no, you're not getting access to the car park, full stop, thank you very much, until you come to an arrangement with us that meets what the community wants. What the community wants, I get, might still be open for debate, but it's, for my mind, I just don't understand why council doesn't just say, I'm sorry, no, put 50 stories up if you want, but you're not getting access to the car park. It's just not on. It seems to me that the council holds a controlling point here on these developments and should be saying, absolutely, positively not, will not consider it. Doesn't matter what you get approval, you're not getting access to your site. That was the main part of it. A couple of other things, which I know is not going to be popular. I don't actually have much of a problem with the height. For my mind, Military Road is now basically going to be a freeway. We lost the ability to be able to get a tunnel that will take most of the traffic off. It is going to be 20, 30 years before there's any change to that. So the fact that there's high buildings on that corridor doesn't really have great problems for me because it's just going to keep the noise and everything associated with that. Yeah, that was really what I was wanting to be able to say.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker? No, thank you
No,
very much
that's
for
it.
your participation.
Nice, thank you.
The next speaker is Meredith Trevelyan Jones. If you would come forward, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. My name is Meredith Trevelyan Jones. I'm speaking on behalf of Willoughby Bay Precinct. I used to be an independent consultant advising government departments on major projects. At the start, I'd be briefed on the desired outcome. I knew I was expected to produce a report that would support that outcome. The Council's Office's report recommends you adopt the advice of an independent consultant who says 9 to 12 stories on land adjacent to Council's Grosvenor Lane car park is acceptable. All that's needed is for some inconsistencies with the Neutral Bay Village planning study to be resolved. But the consultant's report is not consistent on those inconsistencies. It doesn't highlight that 12 stories is inconsistent with the maximum building height of 6 stories in the planning study. Former councillor Gilly Gibson said to me when 8 stories for Arcadia was proposed, you know they'll get 12 stories anyway, referring to the 30% height bonus available for providing affordable housing. There is no mechanism for council to override the state government's policy. A resolution implying 12 stories is acceptable will allow 58 metres or 17 stories. The consultant doesn't highlight the proposal requires the use of public land. When the council resumed land to create the Grosvenor Lane car park in the 1960s, it did not grant easements across the land in favour of neighbouring landowners. That foresight means council is free to turn the car park into a pedestrian plaza. Arcadia has put forward two options to allow owners of luxury apartments to have access to private parking. Option 1 includes an underground swimming pool. Option 2 does not. Both options have private traffic crossing council land. I've got here a diagram. This is option 1, basement plan. The orange line is the boundary of the council car park, and the purple lines are the routes to private parking. This arrangement would prevent council from using the land for other purposes in the future. For example, to build an underground library, as the City of Sydney has done in Green Square, Alexandria. The consultant assumes that Arcadia doesn't need to comply with boundary setback requirements from the council land. Again, this would constrain council from pursuing alternatives in the future. The Green Square Library, for example, includes a 6-storey above ground element. There are better options than what is proposed by Arcadia. Willoughby Bay Precinct supports creating a vibrant pedestrian area in the heart of Neutral Bay, but the precinct opposes 9, 12 or more stories, and it opposes the privatisation of public land. We would ask that you reaffirm the 6-storey height limit and confirm that public land will remain in public ownership. I found out tonight that 2 days ago, a woman was seriously injured by a car speeding in the Grosvenor Lane shared zone. It failed to stop at the stop sign at Young Street and sped off into the Grosvenor Lane car park. Please don't support Arcadia's proposal. It brings more cars into an area that we want to be safe for pedestrians. Thank you.
Are there any questions of the speaker? Thank you for your participation. That brings us to the next registered speaker who will be attending remotely, and that is Sophie Kuznerchuk.
Good evening, Madam Mayor,
Good
councillors. My name is Sophie Kuznerchuk. I'm an Associate Director of Planning at Ethos Urban, and I'm acting on behalf of Arcadia Property Services, which is the proponent for the planning proposal. We have read the assessment report and minutes of the North Sydney Local Planning Panel after its consideration of the planning proposal. Arcadia opposes the recommendation that the planning proposal not proceed to a gateway determination. In our view, the proposal demonstrates strategic and site-specific merit. It deserves to progress to gateway, which importantly is a process that provides opportunities for refinement of the reference scheme and the public benefit offer. It's important to make a distinction between the reference scheme and the planning proposal, as many of the matters raised in the assessment report are appropriately managed at the detailed DA stage or can be further addressed as gateway conditions. And so the key points directly related to the planning proposal are limited to the increase in the minimum non-residential floor space ratio and the increase in the maximum building height, which is from 16 metres to 36 to 45 metres. And we do note there's no contention about the non-residential floor space component. It supports economic activity. And therefore, the key matter relates to building height. It's acknowledged in the independent assessment report, Buying and Planning, that the proposed uplift in height is necessary to economically support the delivery of the public benefits and community facilities, which are unfeasible under the current planning controls. And we also want to bring to the Council's attention that the independent assessment report confirms the view that a building height range of 7 to 12 stories, and I'm quoting from the report here, is generally considered appropriate and acceptable in the context of recent planning changes. Since the Neutral Bay Village Planning Study was adopted, and that includes the lower mid-rise housing policy and infill affordable housing provisions. Notwithstanding that, and in response to the recommendations of Council's assessment report and those made by the panel, we've updated the planning proposal documentation to apply the proposed height and FSR controls to the property at 180 to 182 Military Road. That provides for greater flexibility in terms of built form outcomes throughout the site, and it also provides for a more equitable development outcome. And Arcadia also agrees to amend the indicative concept scheme to increase the width of the west side through site length. So that's from 4 metres to 6 metres, and that's consistent with the Neutral Bay Village planning study.
Your 3 minutes have expired. If you could sum up,
Wrap up.
please.
I won't be a moment. That documentation was submitted to council by the planning portal last week, but unfortunately, according to the officers, it couldn't be considered as part of this report as the report had been completed. Obviously, despite that, those changes are being offered. To summarise the proponent's position, the planning proposal demonstrates strategic and site-specific merit, and it should proceed to gateway determination.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker? No, thank you for your participation.
Thanks for your time and consideration.
That brings us to the final registered speaker, also attending remotely, Rob Mackay. Good evening. If you could unmute yourself and address council, give your name and who you represent.
Good evening all, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Rob Mackay. I'm the co-chair of Brightmoor Precinct, and I was a member of the North Sydney Council Neutral Bay Alive community body, also known as the Neutral Bay Village Planning Study, which worked with council to create a vision for Neutral Bay Village and surrounding areas. Today, I am representing Brightmoor Precinct and the views of our members. The sites in question and the adjoining council-owned car park, along with the supermarket on the northern side of the car park, form the nucleus of Neutral Bay Village and sit within our precinct. Therefore, it is no surprise that Brightmoor Precinct has spent considerable time engaging with the relevant landowners and understanding the strategy for the larger site as a whole. Consequently, Brightmoor Precinct endorses Council's resolution of the 27th of May 2024 to adopt the Neutral Bay Village Planning Study as amended. We also commend Council for not supporting this planning proposal. However, we would suggest, to avoid any ambiguity or misunderstanding, that the wording of the recommendation explicitly note the following. Reiterate Council's position regarding the maximum building height of 6 stories. Reiterate Council's position regarding inclusion of affordable housing in all new developments, with the affordable housing being part of the maximum building height of 6 stories, and that the affordable housing remains in perpetuity. Continue Council's policy of retaining ownership of council land without encumbrance, in particular the community centre and the Grosvenor Lane car park, noting the adjustments made to the plans on the Coles site to ensure adherence to this policy, and reiterate Council's long-held desire to fully pedestrianise the Grosvenor Lane precinct and underground the car park without encumbrance. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to take into account the wishes of the community and provide a world's best practice solution for Neutral Bay Village. For this to happen, Council needs to lead the various landowners to an outcome aligned with the wishes of the community, as already noted. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker? No. Thank you, Mr. Mackay, for your participation.
Thank you.
Is there a motion? Councillor Holding.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I have a motion, which is the 10.9, but with a number of amendments on, additions to which are 2, 5, 6 and 7. Should be up on the screen shortly. I can run through them. So number 2 is that Council reaffirms its support for a maximum building height of 21 metres adopted in the Neutral Bay Village Planning Study. Number 5, that Council immediately implement a moratorium on provision of landowners' consent to any owner of land adjoining the Grosvenor Lane car park precinct pending consideration and determination of Council's EOI, that's expression of interest, process for a future Grosvenor Plaza currently underway, and any subsequent tender process that may follow. And number 6, that Council urge the proponent, in the interests of the orderly and economic use of land, to avoid isolation of adjoining sites and pursue site amalgamation by negotiating and collaborating with the sites currently isolated by virtue of the current proposal. And 7, that Council withdraw landowners' consent to lodge a DA issued to Arcadia in September 2023, as Arcadia didn't subsequently lodge any DA and circumstances have changed, including state government planning reforms and Council's current EOI process for a future Grosvenor Plaza.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by councillor Beregi. Would the movers consider including the suggestion from Mr. Mackay about that any that encourage affordable housing as part of the maximum height and in perpetuity?
Yes, I'm happy to. It's also, I believe it's inherent in the Neutral Bay Village Planning Study, but happy to reaffirm it further, yeah.
Okay, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Yes, look, big thanks to all the speakers tonight, and I'd like to begin on a positive note. If we're talking about community engagement, then this has been a real positive. Many differing members of our community have spoken up individually and together, some here tonight, and their comments reflect a long-standing view and broad grasp of the situation. 3 directly affected precincts alone made submissions to the Sydney North Planning Panel, and their voices were heard. People are passionate about Neutral Bay's future, and they clearly want any rejuvenation to be well thought out, cohesive and long-lasting. They're not just considering this particular development, but the wider scope and impacts on life in Neutral Bay. The nearby Coles development, a potential public plaza, parking, the community centre, the impact on 2 heritage buildings, and proper access for both new and existing residents. As the planner's report describes, this application falls well short of a quality development or strategic placemaking. This isn't just 4 buildings, they are substantial and exist on a constrained site flanked by Military Road while balancing community assets and heritage. Make no mistake, the application is seeking a significant uplift on a site not served by heavy rail or a metro. It's also an application which has been heard and rejected by the Housing Development Authority as a state significant development and assessed by the Sydney North Planning Panel before being passed to this council. Perhaps one of the most disappointing things for me is the many references to the long defunct Military Road Corridor Planning Study. This was a controversial plan initiated by the former mayor in 2018 and consulted during COVID up to 2021. It was rescinded almost immediately by North Sydney Council in 2022. In my view, it was never fit for purpose and was replaced by the more comprehensive and widely consulted Neutral Bay Village Planning Study. That plan envisages 6-storey development and seeks to enshrine affordable housing in perpetuity rather than on a temporary basis, as with most of the state government initiatives. But most importantly, the Military Road Corridor Planning Study exists in another time and place. It entirely lacks relevance today. Why? It was ill-conceived, consulted before and during COVID, and its primary objective was to increase office space, not residential. Crucially, it predates the suite of fast-track tools the state government is now providing to developers. There's the Housing Development Authority, also the state government rezoning on the other side of Military Road at 183 to 185, which has a gateway determination up to 12 stories, but no approval or a specific design yet. And again, the state government's low to mid-rise housing policy, which allows up to 7 or 8-storey development in the R3 medium density zone if it includes temporary and affordable housing. There is now no shortage of avenues and supply for height and luxury housing uplift. In assessing a planning proposal, we must consider the wider placemaking and the community. They've been very clear about their vision, and it does not include 11 and 12-storey towers. There are 6 to 8-storey developments and 1 12-storey development with gateway determination, but that is not open slather for 11 or 12-storey high-rise to be granted by this process. It must have merit, and this application is a much larger prospect than any of the previous state initiatives I've already mentioned. Will any of that housing be affordable by any real metric? Will it address younger Australians' needs and families who wish to stay in Sydney? I doubt it. Affordable housing needs to be, well, affordable. I'm keen for this application to take on the independent planner's comments and to work collaboratively with other stakeholders. A proposal for 12 stories is in opposition to our LEP, the Neutral Bay Village Planning Study and community expectation. The application and other proposals around the Grosvenor Lane car park present artists' impressions of towers overlooking a wonderful tree-lined public plaza. But if you read their proposals, none of them can afford to provide it, while simultaneously seeking usage underneath or on top. As Hannibal Lecter once quipped, quid pro quo. When a gung-ho state government have knocked you back, it's time to work with the community on a more comprehensive planning application.
Thank you. Councillor Santa.
Thank you, Mayor. I note that importantly, the applicant's proposal has been rejected by 3 major groups. Firstly, the North Sydney Local Planning Panel. Secondly, the State Government's Housing Development Authority, that institution designed to accelerate the building of residential property in New South Wales. And it's rejected the SST application. The other group is the owners of properties in the immediately adjacent to the proposed development, and also, and importantly, by 3 precincts: Brightmoor, Neutral and Parkes. And I'd like to quote from, like many of my fellow councillors, I'm sure we've all received a large degree of correspondence on this issue. And I'd like to quote directly from one of those pieces of correspondence, making a further proposal that the maximum building height should remain 6 stories plus the statutory bonus for affordable housing. This is a direct quote. The affordable housing should remain in perpetuity for future generations. It will always be required within the community. Council land should not be privatised to allow access to resident parking. A common entrance to all public parking should be provided. Therefore, proposals received in the Grosvenor Lane car park LOI must be considered. The pedestrianised plaza should be maximised in size, not reduced, to provide parking access for resident parking. The community centre should remain in council ownership to allow a future increase in size and facilities for the growing community. And to improve safety and reduce pedestrian congestion, provision should be provided for a bypass bus stop on Military Road, together with a widened footpath. I agree with most of these points, particularly those relating to affordable housing and the need to allow for the best possible community amenity in the proposed Grosvenor Plaza, and the prejudice which allowing the applicant's development proposal to proceed would result to all of those ideas. I therefore support the amended motion.
Are there any other speakers? And there is no right of reply. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. That now brings us to the other brought forward item, which is notice of motion 11.1. There's one registered speaker, Mr. Timothy Moon, if you would come forward.
My name's Timothy Moon. I'm speaking on behalf of the Neutral Bay Precinct. So this motion is about traffic and pedestrian safety. I've lived in the area for just over 12 years now and seen a lot of, I guess, near misses that have occurred around this area. One in particular, a spot which is a designated no stopping zone. It's on the corner of Yeo Street and Barry Lane. Now, I've witnessed firsthand persistent issue of legal parking. The problem has consistently posed significant safety risks for both drivers and pedestrians. It concerns me deeply because many residents, including the elderly and young, inexperienced drivers regularly encounter difficulties and near accidents when trying to navigate this intersection. The illegal parking in the no stopping zone severely reduces visibility for those turning left or turning right from Barry Lane. The lack of visibility has resulted in numerous close calls for both drivers and pedestrians. Knowing that this endangers our community pushes me to call for a solution that will prevent potential accidents and enhance the safety of our neighbourhood. So what I did a petition. I did a letterbox drop to around about, well, most of the residents that border Barry Lane and within the area. I got over 50 signatures on that petition. I had previously written to council a few years back about installing something that would stop this. I've even researched into other councils that have what they call a traffic blister. So it's a traffic island, it's a triangular island that sits there so that people can't physically pull up and stop. Now I've taken photos of vehicles. I've got 4 examples in my hands here. Unfortunately, I'm not sitting out there every day just waiting for people to pull up. But when I do see somebody pull up, I have recorded it, and sometimes I've had to suggest to them that they're not following the right rules. So look, this is what I've asked for council to consider. I think it would go a long way. As I said, people turning left, they have to take a wide left turn, which often encroaches onto the other side of Yeo Street. During peak hour, it's very dangerous, and people turning right simply don't have the visibility to be able to see any oncoming traffic. There's a couple of options here. Traffic blister by means of plastic, removable if it needs to be, removable traffic island, or a more permanent concrete based one. Thank you for your time, Mayor and
Thank you.
councillors.
Are there any questions of the speaker? Councillor Keane?
Is there any chance we could actually circulate the photos that you've got?
Well, you could
move a motion?
move to
Can I move a
let
motion?
that happen.
To circulate the photos? Just need to
Is there a
second
seconder? Seconded by councillor Carr. All those in favour? Thank you.
Sure. Actually, that's the example, the traffic blister. And these are simply some examples of cars which have been parking there. Or the ones that I could capture.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of the speakers? Thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So to the motion, is there a mover and a seconder?
Move it.
Moved by councillor Keane, seconded by councillor Carr. Councillor Keane?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you to Mr Moon for bringing this to our attention. A number of the residents on Barry Lane have raised this with us about their concerns about coming out of Barry Lane and their lack of visibility. So we'd really like to put to you tonight, councillors, that there is a lot of concern there in the community over pedestrian safety and their own safety, even whilst they are driving out of their own laneway. So if you would consider this blister option can be removable and can be an option just to allow the residents a safe way to exit the laneway.
Is there any other speakers? Councillor Welsh?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moon, and I really appreciate what you guys are going through. I lived in that lane for a number of years. But I will say, okay, that the North Sydney Local Area Traffic Management, or LATAM Action Plan, is a 10-year strategy for coordinating traffic and parking management across 7 zones within the North Sydney local government area. It identifies existing traffic issues, proposes solutions through a series of works and projects, and involves community consultation in its planning and review process. The plan aims to improve road safety, pedestrian accessibility, and vehicle speeds by focusing on engineering solution and infrastructure changes. In the LATAM, there is a plan to do a pedestrian access and mobility study for Zone 6, which includes the area referred to in the motion, So I'm not going to be supporting this motion because it is already on the to-do list. Okay, it all comes down to the money, sadly. All right, the SRV was refused. We have $150 million infrastructure backlog, but this is already on the list. So hopefully we'll get it moved up a bit. I don't know, but I won't be supporting the motion because it's already on the to-do list. Thank you.
Councillor Berrigan?
Thank you, Mayor. I won't be supporting the motion either. Referring this to the local traffic committee, I think there is some confusion as to the role of the traffic committee. The traffic committee is not a committee of council, it's a statutory committee with 4 people on it. If this is going to get referred anywhere, it is to the manager of traffic and transport for consideration. And the reason that this happens is that in the last term of council, actually the term before, the traffic committee was misused, where people just put agenda items on the traffic committee, speed humps, changes to roundabouts, no budget, no nothing, and hundreds and thousands, almost millions of dollars were unbudgeted, but were spent on ridiculous traffic items that did not come from traffic engineers or on any analysis. And ultimately, after seeing all of the traffic speed humps put in Bannerman Street, they were then removed at cost of thousands and thousands of dollars. There is a process. The council is not the process, nor is the traffic committee. Therefore, I won't be able to support the motion, but I agree with Councillor Welsh. This is in our long-term traffic management plan. And if it is for consideration, then this is where this motion needs to go.
Are the movers prepared to take on an amendment, which is that none of 1, 2 and 3, but that the issue of driver and pedestrian safety at Barry Lane and Yeo Street be referred to the manager of traffic and transport for consideration in the context of the LATM? Oh no, be referred to the CEO for review.
Second that.
Well, I'm asking the movers, the mover, whether they'll just take that on. And one of the reasons that I will speak very strongly about that, you really are misdirecting if this is how you think that we deal with these sorts of issues. The local traffic committee is a technical committee under the Roads Act. It has been operating for a decade as a maverick in terms of this council. It committed made all sorts of decisions that had not been part of council strategy and were not subject to traffic engineering advice, and committed funds that had never been considered. And we're not going back to those bad old days. So are you prepared to take that on as an amendment?
Take that on as an amendment.
And will the seconder? Thank you. Well, that then, in which case, then the motion becomes that the issue of driver and pedestrian safety at the intersection of Barry Lane and Yeo Street be referred to the CEO for review. And any appropriate action in the context of the LATM. So you've already spoken to the motion, you just took that on as the motion. So technically you have a right of reply when everyone who wishes to speak to the motion has done so. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Keane, I'll give you a right of reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, in actual fact, yes, I do understand the Traffic Committee and it is a state government committee. However, this has brought this to the attention of our councillors that we do have a pedestrian issue and a safety issue here at Barry Lane. So I actually just want to say I have taken on the amendment because I do want to see this on the agenda and I do want to see change for our residents so that it doesn't just go down and voted against because we brought it to the council. We completely understand the Traffic Committee and we completely understand the LATM, but this has now been put on the agenda and now the residents can actually hopefully get some action through the CEO.
Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? And that is carried. So that takes us back to the rest of the agenda. Councillor Beregi.
Madam Mayor, I have a procedural motion to move some items on Globo.
Okay, in
I
which
have got-
case, I need to, as chair under the Code of Meeting Practice, go through the items and invite anyone who wishes to identify that they wish to speak to them to do so. 9.1, Access and Inclusion Committee. 9.2, Traffic Committee Minutes. 10.2, Matters Outstanding to 25 August. 10.3, I have a motion to propose, an additional motion to propose, so that would be not by exception. 10.4, Model Code of Meeting Practice. Councillor Carr wishes to speak to that. August 2025 month-end financial report. Councillor Santa. Investment loan and borrowings. Fire and Rescue New South Wales 229 Miller Street. Fire and Rescue New South Wales 54 High Street. Dealt with 10.9. Relocation of heritage bus shelters. Fourth quarterly commercial property portfolio report. North Sydney Olympic Pool redevelopment. Okay, so with the exception of 10.3, 10.4 and 10.5.
Thank you, Mayor. I would therefore propose to move on Globo items 9.1, 9.2, 10.2, 10.6, 10.7, 10.8, 10.10, 10.11 and 10.12.
Seconder by Councillor Holding. All those in favour? And that is carried. So that does take us to the rest of the agenda, and the first item there is the election of the Deputy Mayor. I'll ask the CEO.
Thank you. Councillors, I've received one nomination for Deputy Mayor. Is there any further nominations before I do the election? If not, I have one nomination from Councillor Beregi, who's been nominated by Councillor Santa and Councillor Hoy. So if we could take a vote in relation to that.
Elected unopposed.
She's elected unopposed, sorry.
Congratulations, Deputy Mayor Beregi.
Never had an unopposed
one. There's always a first.
Don't we vote?
No, if there's only one nominee, it's elected unopposed. That takes us to 10.3 New South Wales 2025 Local Government New South Wales Annual Conference motions. Councillor Welsh.
I move the recommendation. Yep.
And is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Beregi. I sent in an additional motion to provide for council to provide to the conference. And what it is that Local Government New South Wales calls on the state government to ensure the continuation of the following provisions of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. Section 3.25 of the Act, special consultation procedures concerning threatened species. Section 4.14, consultation and development consent for certain bushfire prone land. 3, bushfire prone land mapping. That's section 10.3 of the Act, and evaluation requirements under section 4.151 B, C and E for all types of development. That is, that a consent authority must consider the likely impacts of development, including environmental impacts on both the natural and built environments and social and economic impacts in the locality, the suitability of the site for the development and the public interest in determining all development applications submitted under the Act. The minimum notification period and 5, the minimum notification period for state significant development be reinstated to 28 days, not 14. I provided a background to this, which is common that we do so for the there we are, for any motions we send to the conference. Pretty much on the 17th of September last week, the state government tabled one of the most radical documents, I think, in a long time. And the reason I think it's radical and it did it in the same week as the Commonwealth Government released the National Climate Risk Assessment Report. There are a number of deeply concerning changes, and they're there in the motion. Those provisions under section 4.14 of the Act require a consent authority when considering an amendment to an LEP or a SEP. The first one is requires a consent authority when considering a development application on bushfire-prone land to be satisfied that it conforms to the specifications and requirements of the Planning for Bushfire Protection Guide prepared by the New South Wales Rural Fire Service. This is outrageous that we have a state government who's just taking away a requirement of a consent authority to have careful bushfire protection as part of the consideration in granting development consent. At the same time, they've just deleted the requirement for councils in consultation with the New South Wales Rural Fire Service to map bushfire prone land. Now that applies in some tiny areas of North Sydney, but it applies across the state, and we've seen enough disasters, and this is setting up the disasters of the future all for the sake of a development free-for-all. It also seeks to remove the obligation to consult with the Chief Executive of the Office of Environment and Heritage when amending or putting forward a new LEP or SEP if the provisions are likely to threaten critical habitat, threatened species, endangered populations and ecological communities or their habitats. Again, this is a devastating blow to biodiversity and environmental issues in the state. But I actually think the one that will impact us the worst and all across Greater Sydney, Newcastle and Wollongong is this new section 4.3 capital A, which allows the Minister or the Planning Secretary through a SEP to declare a particular development, meaning an application or a class of development, and you can bet that will be housing, to be targeted assessment development. And if it is so declared, it will actively turn off those provisions that require a consent authority to take into consideration the public interest, suitability of the site for the development, and any environmental, social and economic impacts of the proposed development. This really fundamentally alters the matters for consideration, providing a gift to developers in terms of development on bushfire-prone land and deliberately removing consideration of the public interest. These reforms support rapacious development at any cost, environmental, economic and social, and they have to be reversed. So that's the reason that I'm proposing that we put that motion to the conference. We are certainly not the only council who are stunned by these proposed changes. Will the mover and seconder vote that on? Yep. Is there any further discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? And that is carried. That then brings us to 10.4, the 2025 Model Code of Meeting Practice. Is there a mover for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Beregi, seconded by Councillor Santa. Councillor Beregi, do you wish to speak to it?
No, Mayor, it's going out on public exhibition. I'm happy to retain my right of reply.
Thank you. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to propose an amendment to the code, which basically the current code of meeting conduct allows councillors to attend remotely. And I'm suggesting.
Can I cut you off? And the reason I'm going to do it is I also thought that we should retain the reasons for remote attendance. And I was going to move something along the lines, except I had advice from the CEO, and I'm going to ask the CEO to make a comment on that.
Through you, Madam Mayor, and yes, sorry, councillors, I just attended late last week a online meeting with the Office of Local Government where general managers from across the state were asking questions about the current model code, and one of those questions was in relation to remote attendance. And the answer that we got from the Office of Local Government is it would be directly against the code and not an enhancement, and therefore would not be accepted to for a council to enhance their code by allowing remote attendance for any other purpose than what is in the code as draft.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, put the item. All those in favour? And those against, and that is carried. That brings us to 10.5, the August 2025 month-end financial report. Is there a mover?
Madam Mayor, I have a motion.
Okay, moved by councillor, about to be moved by councillor Berricky.
So the motion is that council note the end of year financial results for August 2025. The council note that these monthly financial results are the second for this financial year, and the variances cannot be relied upon as performance trend due to timing differences, phasing of revenue and expenditure across the year, and the impact of one-off transactions. That the budgeted 6 million net improvement target includes 1 million increase in fees and charges, 1 million increase in other income, and $1 million reduction in employee costs, and a $3 million reduction in materials and services. And that to achieve these savings, changes to service levels will be required in conjunction with internal efficiencies. The council notes that staff vacancies to continue to be held open to ensure council's liquidity and ability to meet its financial obligations. And the council note that parking income both on and off street remains below budget, and that the budget may have to be adjusted if this revenue stream continues to decline.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Seconded by councillor Santa.
Thank you, Mayor. I will just briefly speak to the motion. Again, whilst it looks like a small surplus, it's anything but anything to celebrate. This is very tight and is making absolutely no contribution to what Councillor Welsh mentioned, which was the $150 million in asset renewal backlogs that we have, and cannot be celebrated. And it also relies heavily on achieving savings, which are very difficult in circumstances where we were trying to keep services and keep staff and keep our liquidity. So whilst I thank the staff for the report, it is not great reading.
Councillor Santa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I note with satisfaction the fact that this report reveals the budgetary responsibility under our current very difficult financial circumstances. Against a backdrop of severe revenue constraints, this report shows that council has recorded a favourable variance against budget projections of almost 2.5 million, a surplus from continuing operations of over 76 million, $5 million above budget, due mainly to increases in revenue from non-rate sources. Operating expenses 1.6 million below budget, including savings and employee costs of $1 million. However, it's noted that cost savings have inevitably required changes to service levels as well as internal efficiencies. All this shows fiscal responsibility. External critics calling for this council to be put in administration, please take note. And I applaud the Chief Executive and the staff for their professional management of our accounts under these difficult financial circumstances.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Put the item. All those in favour? And those against? And that is carried. That now brings us to the final notice of motion 11.2. Is there a mover? Moved by councillor Keane, seconded by councillor Carr. Councillor Keane, you have the floor. If there are other speakers, yep. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The issue on Shellcote Road, it is a one-way street. It allows parking on both sides of the street, and residents of that street have repeatedly have been having issues with the width of the road, especially when trucks go past that road. There's considerable construction happening in Carrabba Point, and then of course there's the garbage trucks that go down the road. So the suggestion is that that council prepares a report on possible options to introduce regulated partial pavement parking on Shell Cove Road. That will allow the road to be slightly wider and hopefully will save some cars from being swiped by the trucks going down the road. There have been comparative approaches used in other Sydney councils to manage similar narrow street parking pressures. So I would urge you to consider this as an investigation to see what we can do to support the residents of Shell Cove Road. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Santa. Did you you still had your light on? Are there any other speakers? Councillor Berrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I can't support this motion as it's calling on council to use staff time on in the wrong way. This again should go to the long-term traffic management through the CEO. And I actually can't support regulated partial pavement parking. It is against all accessibility when the footpaths are already narrow. And if that's the way that you are thinking of going, you will need traffic advice. However, there is a solution, and you remove parking on one side of the road, which I'm not sure the residents would want either. So on the information before me, I'll vote no to this. However, if you did move again to refer it to the CEO, then I would be happy to support it.
Are there any other speakers? Would you wish to exercise your right of reply, councillor Keane?
I'm happy to take that on to refer it to the CEO. So if you would like to move up forward the amendment, and literally it's the same as the previous amendment from the previous motion, that will refer it to the CEO to consider options for solutions. So I'll just let you pull that together, but I'll speak to it in the meantime.
Just quickly ask the seconder, you take that on?
Yes.
Yes, again, of course, we understand the LATM and the traffic committee and the process, but this matter was brought to us by residents because it is a problem. I'm not suggesting the solution. We have put forward a solution, doesn't mean it needs to be that solution. All we're asking for is that the matter is raised in the public forum. We've raised the profile of the fact that this is an issue in Shell Cove Road. Yes, the cars are being swiped as the garbage trucks go through. The garbage trucks don't even go the full length because they can't get in, and they've made provisions. The residents have just asked us to look at options, and that's what this motion is all about. Thank you.
Put the item. All those in favour? Those against? And that is carried. That brings us to the close of the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for your participation.